We start off with our theme keynote with Dr. Siviwe Odwa Malongweni, where she's helping us to explore the question of how do we achieve sustainable farming in Africa? And I think that's a really important part of how do we then go about transforming agri-ecosystems more broadly. Dr. Malongweni, who I had the pleasure of doing voice exercises with this morning because we are practicing how to speak with the low register together. She is a distinguished soil scientist. She's also an environmental sustainability specialist, and her work and her passion really is in practices around the agri-ecosystem. So let's give her a big round of applause. I'm trying to scan. I'm not seeing her. Doctor, where? Oh, there she is. Let's give her a big round of applause as she comes up.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm excited to be discussing a topic that is not only just crucial for the future of agriculture, but also for the well-being of our planet and life in it. So today, I'll be talking about how to achieve sustainable farming in agriculture, with a particular focus on some of the main challenges that are currently faced by small-scale farmers. The outline of my presentation is as follows. I will introduce the topic by emphasizing the importance of sustainable agriculture and highlighting the main reasons why most African farmers are not sustainable. After that, I will delve into transformations. Where exactly do they really begin? Then I will delve into a case study on the work I've currently been doing, present technical solutions, and lastly, I will conclude. Now, starting with sustainability, one thing I hope we can all agree on in this room and virtually is the fact that sustainability is good. Not only just good for the environment, but good for life. According to the United Nations Environmental Programme, this is because when being compared to conventional agriculture, it utilizes less energy, it reduces the rate at which greenhouse gases are emitted into the atmosphere, and it promotes biodiversity. But unfortunately, the majority of African farmers, particularly small-scale farmers, are faced with barriers that are preventing them from being sustainable. These barriers include, but are not limited to, the following: limited access to resources, the lack of knowledge and training, social norms and tradition, health and nutrition, limited access to information, climate change and environmental degradation, insecure land tenure and property rights, as well as policy and governance-related matters. All these barriers threaten our food security, and this is not a good look, more especially taking into account that the world population is expected to increase by at least 2 billion in the next 30 years. And the African population is expected to have been doubled by then when being compared to 2017. So we need to find ways in order to demolish these barriers and feed the world without destroying it. But the big question at hand is, how do we do this? Where do transformations really begin? In order to answer this question, I will be referring to a recent Financial Times article by Susanna. This was a very insightful article, and I would like to use some of its contents in order to build up my argument when answering the question. According to the article, transformations begin with seed. The article states that the majority of farmers in Africa are small-scale or subsistence, and they heavily rely on rain-fed conditions for their crop production. And they plant their crops on heavily degraded soils. to add on top of that, some of these farmers cannot even afford to purchase commercial seeds. Instead, they rely on open pollinated seeds from the previous year's harvest, which then diminishes the current year's production and threatens our food security. But when comparing our continent to other continents, such as Asia, America, and Europe, it was found that these other continents are using seed biotechnology in order to transform their crops. So the African government, NGOs, and private sectors are trying to employ the same strategy here in Africa. To make a practical example of what is being done, I will be using the second widely consumed staple crop in Africa, being cassava. Cassava is consumed by over 40% of Africa's population, with the largest country that's producing it being Nigeria. Nigeria produces about 6 tons per hectare. So, the International Institute of Tropical Agriculture has developed new varieties that are higher yielding. These varieties are a great way of tackling the issue of food insecurity. But unfortunately, there are health concerns, or at least stereotypes, associated with seed biotechnology. One of the main challenges that the Institute is facing is getting the seeds from the laboratories into the hands of the farmer. So it is very difficult for the farmers to get their hands into a seed of any crop. But my question is, what happens when the farmer gets the seed? Because getting the seed does not guarantee you higher yields if you're going to be planting that seed in a heavily degraded soil. That is when the article went on to state that the priority after seeds should be fertilizers. And this is where it gets tricky for me, because the agricultural sector is a highly reactive sector. We don't set our own prices, but we are rather price takers. To make a practical example, I'll just use South Africa. In South Africa, we import about 80% of our fertilizer, with the largest supplier to us being Russia. My prayers go out to everyone who has been affected by the war. The war has had a negative impact on our fertilizer industry, which then has a detrimental impact on our food prices. But before we even got there, the fertilizer prices in Africa have been relatively high as compared to other continents. And the Abuja Declaration on Fertilizers in Africa simply states that just apply more. If you want higher yields, just apply more fertilizer. Unfortunately, applying more is not sustainable. This then takes me back to my initial question of where exactly do transformations really begin? My personal answer to this question is that true agricultural transformations begin with soil. These transformations include keeping your soil covered with organic residues, minimizing soil disturbance, increasing the plant diversity, maintaining living roots, as well as integrating livestock into your cropping system. This is because these practices improve the water filtration and storage capacity of the soil, implying that the farmer will apply less irrigation water and that the crops are becoming more resilient to climate change impacts such as drought. Secondly, they improve the carbon capture and storage capacity of the soil. With more carbon being stored into the soil, the overall health of the soil improves, and therefore making the soil less susceptible to degradation. Thirdly, they improve biological function and diversity, implying that future generations will not be living in a desert someday. Lastly, they improve the productive capacity. With higher productive capacity, the farmer will get higher yields. And this is exactly what the farmer wants to hear. But unfortunately, the majority of our small-scale farmers aren't being sustainable. The main reasons for this is the fact that they lack the knowledge and training. To make a practical example, I'll use conservation agriculture. Some of the farmers in the deep rural villages, somewhere maybe in the Eastern Cape, are not well aware of the fact that transforming from conventional tillage to conservation agriculture, there might be a slight decline in productivity, as can be seen in the graph provided by Grain SA. So when a farmer sees this happening, they might get demotivated, think that it's not working, and eventually stop. But in some instances, the farmers are well aware of the decline, but they do not have the patience to wait a couple of years before they start to receive the rewards, because they need to feed their families now. They don't have the financial luxury to think long term. But thankfully, farmers who are being sustainable are recognized and rewarded for their efforts through what is referred to as the carbon credit programs. The more carbon the farmer stores on their soil and the fewer greenhouse gases they emit from their farm, the more carbon credits they earn, and these carbon credits translate to money for them. Currently existing carbon credit programs in South Africa include the Agri-Carbon program by Anthesis Group, Climate Neutral Group. And this is a carbon consultancy and offset provider. It focuses on different sectors: the energy sector, the agricultural sector, the waste management, as long as you're reducing your carbon footprint. Both these programs are using what is referred to as the Vera VM42 methodology. This is a methodology, which is a VM42 methodology, that is a methodology for improved agricultural land management. But one of the main challenges that the programs might face when working with small-scale farmers is that during risk assessment, the Afalunan Permanence Risk Tool asks if there are any farmers enrolled into your program who are currently or have been previously involved in land disputes. Should there be at least 5% of the project area enrolled into your program involved in land disputes, an excessively high risk score is going to be assigned. The majority of small-scale farmers do not own their land, and they're most likely to be involved in land disputes, therefore increasing the scale of the risk score. One other challenge is that the methodology requirement is that the farmer should provide documents which serve as proof for the improved land management practice that they are aiming or claiming credits for. Unfortunately, the majority of small-scale farmers do not have advanced technology to help capture and store this information. The farmer also needs to give at least 3 to 5 years of data that this is what they were implementing before implementing the change. And unfortunately, small-scale farmers, in some cases, do not keep such records for a prolonged period of time. The farmers who are being sustainable and do have the records are probably wondering, out of all the improved land management practices, which practice is most likely to earn or give them more credits? According to literature, a practice with the highest potential of building soil organic carbon is managed grazing. But it is important to note that these practices are more effective in building up soil organic carbon when they are being used in unison. And let's be honest, this is not a new concept. These are practices that we are all familiar with. These are practices that our forefathers have been using for generations upon generations. And it is about time that we go back to the basics and work with nature and not against it. Speaking of working with nature, some of the farmers in the Western Cape province, the wine farmers, have been slowly replacing the alien species with fynbos. Fynbos acts as a natural pest control, therefore mitigating the issue of heavily relying on pesticides, which eventually deteriorate our environment. So let us go back to the basics, because nature is capable of taking care of itself. And I know that's such a bold statement to make. In order to put this bold statement to the test, we conducted a case study to look at the impact of fire and herbivores towards soil quality in semi-arid savanna ecosystems of South Africa. Soil quality can be defined as the ability of the soil to perform its ecosystem functions. And these functions include nutrient cycling, biodiversity, structure and stability, climate and water regulations, and these functions can be assessed using what is referred to as soil quality indicators. Soil quality indicators are the physical, the chemical, and the biological properties of the soil. The main question we wanted to answer when conducting this study was that, can soil quality contribute towards sustainable development as a data source and information carrier? Because we know that in semi-arid savanna ecosystems, such as the Kruger National Park, for example, fire and herbivory are natural disturbances. And these disturbances do impact our soil quality, but unfortunately, their impact is often overlooked up until the quality of the soil has diminished. Therefore, we evaluated the 20-year impact of fire and herbivores towards the soil quality of Nkuhlu exclosures, which were situated within Sikukuza camp in Kruger National Park. These exclosures were established in 2002, and the data was collected in 2022. In terms of treatments, we had an open access area, which is an unfenced area where all herbivores were permitted to enter. We then had a partial exclosure, which is a partially fenced area where the animal entry is permitted by virtue of size. Large and tall animals were not permitted to enter. Lastly, we had a full exclosure where no animals were permitted to enter. These exclosures were then subjected to 2 fire treatments of burning and no burning. Burning took place on an annual basis, and these were all controlled burns. The fire outbreak was controlled through the use of fire breaks. Data was then collected on 2 vegetation types of open grassland zones and areas underneath tree canopy. Now, coming to our data, in terms of soil quality, we observed that for exclosure, the poorly performing treatment was the partial exclosure. And this is the exclosure where we interfered with nature. It was said that the large animals trample on the soil with great force, therefore causing compaction. And the large and tall animals, they break down tree branches, they cause the trees to fall over, they are disruptive to the environment, they should totally be removed. The minute that was done, that's when we started to see a decline in the overall quality of the soil. And then we looked at fire and observed no significant differences between burnt and unburnt plot. And this is because fires in semi-arid environments such as the Kruger National Park are not severe or intense enough to cause significant change. Now, when looking at vegetation type, we observed that the trees performed better. This is because the mammalian herbivores tend to aggregate underneath the trees. They then deposit their droppings. The animal droppings in association with the tree litter improves soil fertility and therefore the overall quality of the soil. Now, we zoomed in closer to one of the soil quality indicators, being soil organic carbon. And we observed that for both exclosure and fire, there were no significant differences amongst all the treatments. And this is due to external factors such as climate as well as soil characteristics. The climate at the Kruger National Park is hot, semi-arid. The high temperatures then accelerate the rate of mineralization, therefore making it difficult to build or store carbon for prolonged periods of time. And then the second factor being soil type. The soil type is coarse, sandy soil, and sandy soils have lower ability of building soil organic carbon compared to clay soils. When it comes to vegetation type, trees once again performed better. This is because unlike open grassland zones, which have direct access to solar radiation, the soil under the tree canopy is protected from direct heavy rays from the sun, therefore cooling the temperatures underneath the soil, therefore lowering the rate of mineralization and allowing for carbon to be stored in there and to be stored for a prolonged period of time. These findings can also be applicable on an agricultural standpoint of view, where we are looking at the impact of different grazing systems towards soil quality in the long run. Or better yet, we can look at the impact of holistic grazing on soil quality, since it is hypothesized that holistic grazing improves soil quality, and with better quality soil, there will be greater quality vegetation that is growing. So if you're growing better quality grasses, which are then going to be consumed by your cow, this then reduces the rate at which your cows are going to be emitting methane. Methane is a highly toxic greenhouse gas, as we all know, despite it only being 10% towards greenhouse gases as compared to carbon dioxide, which is about 80%. It has a very dangerous ability to trap heat. Over the period of 5 years, it can trap up to about 100 times heat as compared to carbon dioxide. Therefore, by minimizing the rate of emissions from your cows, you are in a way reducing the warming up of the Earth's surface. This work was conducted by me in collaboration with Professor Van Tol of the University of Free State, and the work was funded by the Department of Forestry, Fisheries, and Environment under the Natural Resource Management Program. Now, coming back to agriculture, what are the technical solutions that I think we can present as a way to move forward in driving transformations? According to my opinion, starting with research, I think that researchers should gather insights that are not only just theoretical, but are also practical. Using carbon as an example, we should ensure that the models that are used for making future projections of the carbon that one is earning through the programs are representative of what is happening in the field, and that they are not overestimating carbon stocks. It would be rather more conservative to under than to overestimate carbon, because at the end of the day, we are building carbon for soils and not soils for carbon. So it is important for one to not be greedy. The research organizations should also work in collaboration with the government, with the NGOs, private sectors, stakeholders, and so on and so forth, in order to minimize the negative impact of siloed work. And it is about time that we hold people accountable, because every time we go to conferences and we say that there should be more collaborations, but it is important to collaborate and make sure that every organization that is present is put in charge of something so that someone can be held accountable for a specific purpose that they are playing. When it comes to governance, I think that the proactive land acquisition strategy is a starting point. Since the government is set to release about 2.5 million hectares of land through the land redistribution program, this land can be used to grow the agricultural sector And it also serves as a source of hope for small-scale farmers in terms of land expansion. Because once the farmer owns their land, they invest in it because there's a lot to lose. And there are also legal implications associated with the farmer having to take care of that land. Lastly, when it comes to NGOs, I think that they should continue to work to strengthen the market linkages and the value chains for smallholder farmers in order to ensure that they're able to access the market and receive fair prices for their products. So, in conclusion, I would like to state that true agricultural transformations begin with soil. Let us make sure that we husband it and it will grow our food, our shelter, and our fuel. And on top of that, it will give us a bonus added benefit of surrounding us with beauty. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to my presentation. And a special thank you to the Trialogue team in association with FirstRand for granting me the opportunity to come here and share my points and perspectives from an environmental standpoint of view. Thank you, everyone.
So before you run off, very quickly, you can come and join me up here in front. I just want to squeeze in a question because there have been so many questions that have come from our audience. And there's one that I wanted to squeeze in from Becky. So Becky says, research suggests that by 2035, the world will run out of soil, and that is fertile soil that he's referencing. And given that your presentation says the soil is the foundation of transformation, how do we ensure that we have a constant availability of soil?
The issue is we will run out of soil if we continue to use toxic agrochemicals and we're not being sustainable. The minute we start being sustainable, the soil will be our life, because the more carbon that is being stored in there, the healthier the soil becomes and less degraded. And the reason why we will be running out of soil is because we are not being sustainable. We are degrading our soils over the long period of time. And it is time for us to go back to the basics, making sure that we take care of our soils so that it can be able to take care of us.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's give Siviwe a big round of applause.
Yeah.
Thank you so very much.